G'day Jaffa Adventures, Terry King here. Welcome to the channel and welcome to the very first build video on the FJ45. What I've got sitting here in front of me is a complete front diff out of a 60 series, and what I'm particularly interested in on this is the disc brakes. The FJ's got drums, not good enough to stop a vehicle powered with an LSA, so I'm going to need some discs, hence the reason that I bought this front diff. Now the only thing I know about this is that I've heard 60 series front disc brakes will fit on an FJ45. So that's basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to take everything off from the steering hub outboard on both sides. What I'm unsure about is the steering and whether the steering linkages hook up, but you know what? We'll find that out as I go along. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of videos that actually detail this. There's commentary saying that 60 series disc brakes fit, but there's not actually any videos on how to actually do this. So you know what? I'm going to give it a crack. Hopefully I'll be able to stumble along and end up with a set of front disc brakes on the FJ. So let's get stuck into this, shall we? The first thing I'm going to do is take these brake lines off. And what do you know, that actually cracked. Okay, now we can take the caliper off. We got 2 bolts holding that on. Alright, that's our caliper off. We'll do a complete rebuild on those calipers. New pistons, new seals, new pads, the lot. Alright, that's our swivel hub. And that looks relatively unmolested. Now, there's a circlip there that we've got to spread and take off the end of this stub axle shaft so that we can get that off. Alright, there's our clip. Okay, gotta get our mud wasps out of here so we can access our bolts. The other awesome thing are these cone washers. They're always a little bit of a struggle. Another one. I'm not hitting this chrome or aluminum hub at all. I'm hitting the steel on the hub to dislodge those cones. Another one. Another one. That's it. We got them all. And that slides off like that. That's in pretty good nick too. Now because I'm going to rebuild these hubs completely, I'm going to take these studs out. And to do that, screw on one of these 12mm nuts. And another one. And we'll lock them together and unscrew the stud. There we have it. Out comes the stud. And we just simply rinse and repeat, I believe, to get the rest of these out. Alrighty, let's pull that rotor off. That's it. Excellent. We're getting there. All right, we'll continue pulling this stub axle down. She should get used to it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm just showing it.
That cup get under there. Wow. Well, that CV or Burfield has really been looked after. Phew, amazing. All right, let's pull that axle shaft out of there. There's a flat on it that fits somewhere. There it is. And there's our axle shaft. Now I'll pull off these sweep seals. It's pretty rusty and crusty. But I got to admit, these sweep seals are in pretty good shape. There's not been a lot of weeping out of them, despite the fact that they're rusty and crusty. There's the felt. That backing ring. Come on, you. Here's the rubber seal. Pretty doggone good. All right, now we undo these bolts. That hub comes off. And there's our hub off. We'll set that in the drain dish here and just allow that to oil to drain out of it. And there we have it, one side disassembled. Now the diff is completely stripped down, and I'll just give that away because that's worthless to me. And here's a table full of parts that I need to do a complete rebuild on everything that you see here on the table. I've got all my replacement parts here, so that's all good to go. The first thing that I'm going to tackle is I'm going to pull apart these brake calipers and do a complete rebuild. And when I'm finished, that one will look like that one. That I did a little bit earlier, and that's had a full seal kit through it, new pistons, basically everything that can be replaced on it has been replaced. Just waiting for the brake pads to arrive and should be good to go. So let's strip that nasty one down on the left and I'll walk you through my rebuild process. Alrighty, let's pull this sucker apart. First thing we got to do is take the brake pads out, and to do that, take these little wire retainers out. That's one side. Another one that's held here, but you got to drive these pins out to get to that one. Pin number one. As your brake pads go skew, if just sort of straighten them out again. Number two. That little retaining clip can come out now. And the brake pads just slide out. And those are crusty. Not much left on that. It's all good, we're replacing them anyway. Now I got to get these pistons out. What I'm going to do is pressurize the system by putting some compressed air at this fitting and try and drive those pistons out a little bit at a time. So the reason I popped those brake pads back in there in that little block of wood is when I pressurize this, I don't want one piston to pop out, because as soon as I do that, my pressurization idea is all over. Cool, let's push them out a little bit further. Now I just got to drive my block of wood out of there. So these two pistons have come out, and they're pretty close to actually sticking out past the caliper completely. So hopefully these guys here pop out a little bit before those guys come out the rest of the way. And that one did, so we had a win there. These two small pistons, they look like they're pretty much seized. So we're gonna have to go the rest of the way. And that's it. That's as much as we can use our compressed air for. Look at how crusty that piston is. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split the caliper with these 4 bolts so that I can access those pistons. Don't need our brake bleeder anymore. And there we have it. Caliper is split. So let's get rid of some of this crap first. There's a little retaining wire that holds these boots on. Just gotta pop that retaining wire off. Ooh, that's crusty. She's coming. See whether we can get that now. Here we go. Come to Papa. There we go. Piston removed. We're going to replace that as well. And that caliper, that half of the caliper, is stripped completely down to its constituent parts. A couple of more things to do before we clean this up on the wire wheel. First of all, we pull these seals out inside of the calipers. They're just a square seal. Now the other thing that I want to do is I want to take my brake hone and I just want to clean up this top edge. The actual bore where the piston sits is in pretty good nick, so I'm not going to do any honing there. But I just want to clean a little bit of the rust up on this outer edge here. And that didn't work all that well. There's still some crusty rust there. So I think I'll get a flapper wheel on a die grinder. One of these little guys. That's much better. That rust is all cleaned out on that top bit above the seal. Alright, the wire wheel's done on the bench grinder. Now we'll just use a small drill one to get in the final nooks and crannies. Second half done. Let's clean them down with some solvent. I'm going to use some brake cleaner, but you could use any sort of solvent you wanted. Those are all cleaned down with brake cleaner. Hit it with a little bit of wax and grease remover, and then we'll spray these suckers. I really should be wearing gloves when I do this, so the oils on my hands don't transfer onto the caliper, but I just can't be jacked at the moment. Now I'm just going to tape up these machine surfaces so that I don't get any paint on that. Next thing I'm going to do is put these old crusty pistons back in there so that I don't paint inside of the bore. There we go, ready for paint. So the paint I'm going to use is called caliper paint. To be honest, it's probably just regular paint. $20 more expensive because it's got caliper paint on it. Now if those pistons fall out when I flip them over, it won't be any big deal because I've already painted the bottom side. And I did. What's this? We're done. All right, laid out in front of me is everything we need to rebuild this caliper. So let's hook into it. First thing we're going to do is pop these seals into the bores in the caliper. They give you a little bit of this assembly grease in the pack. So I'm just going to smear a little bit of that grease on these seals. Awesome. Here's one seal. Sweet. Then I'll take a little bit of that grease again and put it on each of the pistons. And we'll slide the piston in. Won't push it down all the way because these other seals, these dust seals, need to be fitted on there. All right. Now we take our dust seals and they pop around the piston with one lip, and then the second lip goes around the caliper. And you just got to make sure that they're pushed down all the way, like so. Then we get our snap ring, and that's just basically a piece of spring steel. You see I'm using the back edge of this pointer so that I don't puncture that dust seal. And I'm just using that to push that snap ring down to the base. And that's it, that dust seal is now installed. Push our piston in a little bit so it'll make clearance for our brake pad. Done. Now we rinse and repeat by 3 more. Okie doke, 2 halves done. Next, we've got these 2 small O-rings that go here and here before we bolt the 2 halves together. There we have it. Nice and seated in there. Yeah, we'll just tighten those by hand so I know how tight they actually are rather than using a machine. I'm sure there's a torque specification, but I'm going to go with that click 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 click. Beautiful. Okay, I don't have my brake pads yet, but I'll assemble up these pins anyway so that they are a complete unit with the caliper and I don't end up losing them. Brakes were meant to arrive by now, but they didn't, so it's the way it goes. Line the holes up on these 2 pins correctly. Pop that one in there, that one in there, that one in there like that, that one in there like that, and then these 2 clip inside of our brake pad. Next, we fit our bleeder, and I've already lubed those threads up with a little bit of that grease. I won't tighten that all the way down, just cinch it in there so I don't lose it. And that's it. Brake caliper done. All I need now is some brake pads. This little puppy can go back on the car. So I was going to hook into cleaning all of this stuff up and painting it before assembly, but I'm actually going to hold fire on that. So what I'll do is I'll pull that side of the 45 apart and just make sure that these bits will actually hook up to the axle under the car before I go ahead and remanufacture everything here and clean it up, because that's going to be a serious pain in the backside if I actually can't use it. Everything I've heard says I should be able to use it, but I don't know. I've never done it myself before, so it's a little bit of an investigative journey, I guess. So let me pull that one side of the 45 apart and have a look at that and compare it to what we've got here. Nice. We'll pull this wheel off and disassemble it and then compare it to the parts that I've got sitting there on the table. I love this sort of shit. Now that's an innovative way to get to the brake adjuster on the rear hub. Just take your angle grinder out, carve a big bloody hole in it. Nice. I love it. All right, I've backed the adjuster off. Now these are apparently brand new brakes. And just looking at that machined surface there, I'd say they probably are. It's a brand new drum by the looks of it. That's better. Yes, look at that. That is a brand spanking new drum. The seller was absolutely fair income. Those are brand new brakes, brand new wheel cylinders, brand new everything. Nice one. Well, I'll take a few photos of that and post that up on Marketplace. I don't need the brakes, but somebody might be able to use them. I like this worn locking hub mechanism. That is really cool. It's pretty dry. That's a coarse spline axle. The one out of the 60 series is a fine spline. Okay, well that means that I'll probably need to use the axles out of the old 60. I hope it's bloody fine spline on the diff end. All right, let's keep digging. That was not fun. So I've got a bolt there that will not come out and it's rounded off. So I'm going to get the welder, weld another bolt onto the end of it, and hopefully that'll allow me to back it out. Let's give it a crack anyway. Okay, let's see whether I can get that sucker off now. Come on, baby, don't break. Gotcha. Sweet. It broke off inside the hub. Far out. Oh well, we can get our hub off now anyway. Okay, Mr. Hub. Just like that. Coarse spline axle. I was running out of energy there, so I went and had a swim, and I feel bloody great now. It's 37 degrees out, so she's a warm one. Same as the 60 series. Gotta knock these little tabs over so we can get that nut off. Here's our nut. There's our little retainer with the tabs. There's our second nut. All right. Now that hub should just slide off. Nice. There's the outer bearing. There's the inner bearing. Sweet. So I've disconnected the brake line so I can take this backing plate off and leave these wheel cylinders in situ. Okay, I believe that backing plate should just pop off now. Just like that, eh? There we go. Now that stub axle looks like it is ready to come off as well. Yep. There we go. Off with the stub axle. Boy, oh boy. Those CVs are dry. Gotta find the sweet spot. There it is. Alright, so coarse spline on the one end and fine spline on the other. So I should just be able to use the CVs out of the 60 series, provided that is the same length. I'll spin that nut around and I'll just give that a tap first. Who knows, maybe it'll just tap straight out. But if it doesn't, use our rubber mallet. couldn't be that lucky, could we? We'll use our BAS, the big ass shifter. Unfriggin' believable that came out so easy. So there's that one. All right, sweep seal's off. There's a bunch of 10 mil bolts on the back side of the hub here to get it off. Now, look at that. We can clear that bearing. It's totally grooved where the bearings have been sitting there just sort of jiggling up and down because it's been improperly adjusted. Incredible. Well, we'll obviously knock those out and replace them with brand new bearings. Two. The 60 series axle here and the 45 here. And I'm just checking them to see whether they will work. So from the back of the burr field to the end is identical in length on both. So tick that box. The spline on the end of both axles is identical. So we can tick that box. The mating surface here where the seal runs, the inner axle seal is in an identical spot. So we can tick that off. That one's about 33 millimeters in diameter. That one's 33 millimeters as well. So basically from the burr field back, these things are identical. From the burr field forward, they're not. This one's a coarse spline on the 45. This is a fine spline on the 60. And the 60 is marginally longer. But that's all right because I'm basically taking the entire hub along with me. Those two are identical in diameter. The last thing I want to check is the diameter of this burr field to make sure that it'll fit inside of the axle housing itself. So I found one minor fitment issue. This burr field on the 60 is about 1 millimeter larger than the burr field on the 45, and that won't fit through the hub on the end of the axle housing. So I'm going to have to take a die grinder and just relieve the inside of that axle housing 1/2 mil on either side to allow that burr field joint to fit through. All right, let's go get our CV joint, see if it fits. Beautiful. Okay, now I can pop the inner axle seal in there and start to reassemble. The other thing I wanted to check was that these races and bearings were the same size in the 60 and the 45, and they absolutely were. So that's a bonus. So I'm thinking that this is a pretty straightforward swap. Short side of the axle, perfect. Long side, which I didn't check, not so perfect. Tune in next time to see that trap for the uninitiated and learn from my experience.